to the youth, the first ever appointed by Secretary General. And so, dear friends, I say this once again, that network as much as you can, because there are great people in this conference room who can make your life, who can give you that platform, who can guide you, who can steer you, who have seen the United Nations, and then who will be able to help you really. So network as much as you can, ask relevant questions, and that will be really helpful for you to build your career as well in this. Thank you. I invite Jamie now to take over this panel. From now on, he'll be the session host as well as the academic panel moderator. And then I sign off from here. I'd like to thank Patrick Sharada, the Youth Assembly Friendship Ambassadors Foundation for this great opportunity that they gave me to host this panel discussions in the morning and to be with you. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I know it's getting late in the day. It's hard to keep track of all these long conversations. So I just want to do a chant. I know you met my friend Mike Skolnick yesterday. We actually met on the Obama campaign. I worked on it this summer. Before every rally, to keep people activated, to keep people energetic, because it's a shame. Fired up, ready to go. I want to hear from you guys. Fired up.
Ready to go.
Fired up.
Ready to go.
Fired up.
Ready to go.
There you go. I hope you guys are ready to go. We have some great speakers. I can go back. Hello, hello. Perfect. All right. Now that we are all together again, my name is James. It's great to meet all of you. I'm going to do a very quick introduction of myself. In 2007, I was sitting exactly where you're sitting at my first ever youth assembly at the UN. Even though I grew up in Manhattan, I had never been to the United Nations before. I didn't know how passionate I was about international development until I came here and saw all the young people around me from different countries and heard about all the great things they were working on. And I made so many great friends like Sebastian and Patrick and all the people sitting next to me that I decided I wanted to dedicate a large portion of my life to connecting young people and young leaders in and around the UN. And that's how I ended up on stage here, and I am amazed that I had the honor of introducing two very distinguished guests. I'll be with you for the next 2 hours, but I'm very happy for the moment to introduce two very distinguished guests who were with us yesterday. A dear friend and partner, Amir Dossal, founder of the Global Partnership Forum, as well as Andrea Taylor, Director of Community Affairs from Microsoft USA. They'll be discussing youth leadership and corporate responsibility, and then we'll take a panel on youth leadership and academic development, and I want this to be a very interactive conversation with all of you. So please play along, participate, and enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, for the kind introduction. Today we have an exciting session for you. As you heard briefly yesterday, that Microsoft does great things to engage young people, and we have the privilege and honor to hear from Andrea Taylor, who is the Director for Corporate Citizenship at Microsoft. Does great work in using technology, and at the same time, I can tell you that Microsoft has been a strong partner of the United Nations for a number of decades. I remember about 20 years ago, when we invited Microsoft to join us in addressing some of the Millennium Goals issues, and they had launched something called Unlimited Potential, which is really going into the developing world and training people so that the young people as well as people without jobs could understand Microsoft systems and other systems, which in turn could lead them to good, lucrative opportunities. So it was a question of doing good and doing well. And that concept actually helped the UN in a number of ways, including address the issue of youth unemployment, which, as you know now, has become a huge issue. And once again, Microsoft has embarked on a new campaign, which you'll shortly hear about. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Andrew Taylor to give a presentation. And time permitting, I would like to have Q&A so that you have an opportunity to ask Andrea some questions as well. So Andrea, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us.
Can you hear me? Is that working now? Good afternoon. Hello. I'm back again. Thank you for your indulgence in having me back for a second opportunity to interact with this terrific, wonderful, and very energetic group of young people. Today, my focus will be really on sharing with you the commitment that one corporate response, if you will, to young people and developing young people in the world. I have a few slides. I'd like to walk you through our YouthSpark initiative, which I think I referenced yesterday, give you some more details, and then, as Amir said, I think we should have some dialogue so that you can get a deeper understanding of what we're trying to do and how we can be of help to you. So my topic is Bridging the Opportunity Divide, YouthSpark and Global Corporate Response. And to set up the conversation, I'd like to show you a very brief video. Every time I try to use a PowerPoint, which is a Microsoft product, we have challenges. So bear with me for a minute. Is a great story. I grew up in a town called Mombasa with no running water, no electricity. It's basically a slum. I really like it. I love it. All that I am today has been shaped and molded by the experiences I had from that area. But I wanted to achieve better than my slum would offer. I wanted to know as much as I could. My name is Wedderburn, and my story is a great story. I grew up in a town called Mombasa with no running water, no electricity. It's basically a slum. I really like it. I love it. All that I am today has been shaped and molded by the experiences I had from that area. But I wanted to achieve better than my slum would offer. I wanted to know as much as I could, and there wasn't that chance for me to do that. In 2006, I was among the first 10 girls who were chosen to join the Global Give Back Circle, a mentoring and enabling process. And we wrote to our mentors. And then in 2008, I was done with high school. We did the national exams, and I went back home. And I was set to helping my mom raise the other kids. And I got a phone call and I was told, you know what, come back to school. We want you to continue with another course, a Microsoft course. I told my mom and she told me, pack your bags, go. And that's exactly what I did. My communication with my mentor had taken 6 months the first time. It took minutes to write an email. That was incredible for me.
How is the life in university?
You know, I never knew that.
someone so far away would actually, I would actually hear them and see them. I'm thankful to the universe. I'm thankful to the people who helped me to get the opportunities I got. To whom much is given, much is required. I want to be the best I can. That is my mom, that's my dad, those are my siblings, that's Esther, that's Enoch, that's Kyoko is looking outside, the commander, that's Kadoni Charity, that's my family, and those are my neighbors, all of them. It feels good to be home.
So that's Mary, and that's Mary's story, and we know and have met thousands, literally tens of thousands of Marys out there, all of whom are looking for new opportunities and who are prepared to make change in the world. And Microsoft as a company is committed to helping to bridge the gap and create a movement through our YouthSpark program that will allow the Marys of the world to take advantage of many new and exciting opportunities. The opportunity divide, as we've talked about in the last day and a half together, is a real phenomenon. 75 million young people across the world are unemployed. The unemployment rate in this country and elsewhere is about twice as high among young people as it is in the general population. And one of the issues that is really a problem with respect to the opportunities that young people are prepared to take advantage of has to do with the lack of proper skills and training and access to education. So you have less than 50% of young people who really have the training that they need for today's world and the jobs of the 21st century. And then 1 in 4 young people are actually counted among the working poor. And many of these young people are working to help support their families and contribute to household income. And yet, despite their efforts of being students, being workers, being young people, trying to just enjoy the things that young people do, they still find themselves disadvantaged in substantial ways. And so we have developed this program called Microsoft YouthSpark, which was really an attempt to pull all the resources that we have across the world, or across the country, the company, to help the young people, the hundreds of thousands of young people like Mary Mwende, to achieve their success. We have a three-pronged approach to help empower young people, to help them imagine their future and build it, and to help realize their dreams through education, employment, and entrepreneurship. We find that in the empower issue, and I'm going to go through these very quickly, we make a number of grants so that we can help organizations to bring these opportunities forward for young people. We work very much with a number of global organizations. This is a global program that's intended to reach 300 million young people over the next 3 years. We began our journey about a year ago, actually, by commissioning a study which was produced by the International Youth Foundation, and they were represented here, as you know, yesterday. And they came up with a report that said there needed to be much more focused attention on the needs and concerns of young people and harnessing the resources that are available to them but may not be immediately accessible. And so we support a number of organizations as part of that process. And the Imagine aspect of our program involves unleashing the potential of these many, many millions of young people across the country. And we have a program which we are calling Innovate for Good. And Innovate for Good is probably coming to a city or state or country near you very soon. We began this Innovative for Good idea about a year ago. Last March, we held the first Innovate for Good session in Seattle at the home headquarters of Microsoft. We invited about 120 young people from around the country to come together and begin to build a network that would eventually be worldwide, to put them in touch with other young people like themselves who were trying to achieve their goals, and to make them aware of the resources, technological, educational, and otherwise, that would help them. We found that these events were quite quite successful. So we hosted last year about 7 or 8 of them. The second one was in Cairo.
Why?
Is there?
Why?
Oh, all right. The second event was in Cairo, and we invited about 150 young people again to that event. And the day of the event, about 300 young people showed up, and they had heard about it. They wanted to be a part of it. They thought there might be something there that would be useful for them. And somehow, miraculously, we managed to accommodate all of the young people that showed up that day. And one of the comments that was made that we thought was very that was very telling was the fact that young people had not, for the most part, had not been invited to an event where they were actually asked to give feedback about what they needed, about what they wanted to do, about what resources were most helpful to them. So we ended up having a series of these conversations across the world, in Brussels, in Beijing, in Singapore, and other places, Mexico City, and we will continue this conversation with young people, listening and learning and helping to tailor programs that will be suitable for them. The very next one of these events will be taking place in Washington, D.C. in about 2 weeks. So if there's anybody here from the Washington, D.C. area, if you'll let me know who you are, we'd be delighted to extend an invitation to you to join us there. And then another piece of our program with YouthSpark is the Realize area, and this again is involved in increasing employability and entrepreneurship. And we decided that one of the things that young people often need in order to actualize their dreams and to further develop their ideas is funding. And so we thought it might be interesting to experiment with building an online micro-giving portal, which we call Give for Youth, that would allow anyone on the planet, anyone anywhere in the world, to go online, look at and read about stories and programs of young people who are trying to achieve their goals, and allow these projects to seek funding through the online process. So we created the site. If you go to giveforyouth.org, you'll be able to look at it and read about programs all across the world in many different areas, education, the arts, health, etc., that are of interest. And if you decide that you want to donate, you'll see on the screen an amount that the organization is seeking in order to further their work. And then you'll see a running tally of how much funding they've already achieved. And you can make a donation, a minimum donation of $5, or you could make the entire contribution, which in this case would have been $4,855 for the project. And you would be informed as the project develops and is in the implementation stage about what is actually happening with the project and what success they are achieving. This has been an enormously popular site. We don't think there's anything else out there in the world like this. When we began, we didn't know what kind of response we would get, so we put up a challenge at the beginning of the process. This was launched in September of 2012. And we put up a pledge of $100,000 from Microsoft to be matched 1-to-1 for any of the organizations that were able to take advantage of this. And we found that within less than 7 hours, the match was met. There were people in different time zones across the world who hadn't even awakened to know about the challenge, and they were very disappointed, so we put up an immediate additional match, and that went also very quickly. To date, I think we have now helped organizations raise over $1 million, and we just began this process in the fall of last year. So if any of you are working with organizations that might have an interest in the site, again, if you go to the website, there is a process that you can go through to be vetted and to potentially be a part of the Give for Youth, which we think is a very important tool for helping to fund the projects that young people are engaged with. So now I would like to share with you another video about a program that we call TEALS, which is Teaching, Education, and Learning.
The economy here is very bad. Our school system and our oil is probably the biggest things.
really apologize. We went through several different times.
The economy here is very bad. Our school system and our oil is probably the biggest things that we have going. It's not where you want to go for work.
But it's a proud county. The people take pride in who they are, and it's a good place to live.
You take the good with the bad. I just love it here, and this is where I wanted to raise my children. Jeremy has not a whole lot of interest in different things. Technology is where he wants to be. He learned what he could on his own, but then he didn't know where to go from there. He didn't even know how to go from there.
I want to be a software engineer. Would be awesome. I just like to create stuff. That's why I always wanted to make games.
He had no confidence in himself. His grades were less than perfect. And after this class came and the program started, he just can't wait for third period.
I'm a software engineer working for Microsoft, and I teach in the mornings through a program called TEALS. Well, TEALS is largely local. What we're doing this year is to try to take a lot of the successes that we've had locally and see if we can have a national impact. I believe that people shouldn't be limited just by kind of where they were born and the circumstances they were born into. I'm teaching remotely, but out into rural Kentucky. And that's huge. That's so huge for me.
Well, TEALS has been a godsend to us. We couldn't afford the teachers and the program, and so Microsoft has stepped in, and we're very thankful.
And it's just helped him all the way around. Sky's the limit for him now.
Yeah, like I thought I wasn't gonna go to college, and now I'm considering it, and it changed my life.
How do you thank somebody enough to know that your child knows he's somebody now and gonna be great?
Thank you. I'm moving toward closing out, but I just want to say another word about the TEALS program. The TEALS program was started by a young man named Kevin Wang, who is an employee at Microsoft. He is a graduate of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and he came to Microsoft about 4 years ago, I believe now, to accept a job as a computer engineer. And he was working in computer engineering and living in the greater Seattle area, and he realized that young people in the schools in Seattle were not getting any training in computer science education. And he decided that he would organize a program with the cooperation of the Seattle Public Schools and go in on his way to work and spend an hour and a half, 3 or 4 days a week, helping to teach organizing and teaching a course in computer science. And the demand grew. Students were interested. The school was very pleased to have him. He had a skill set that sadly was not available among the faculty at the Seattle Public School System. And he began to recruit his friends, who were also computer science engineers at Microsoft, to become volunteers in this area. Microsoft, parenthetically, has a very robust volunteer program, and we encourage our employees to give their time and their money to causes that interest them. And so he set up a training program for these students, and they were teaching these courses every morning between 8 and 9:30, and then they would come to work for their day job and do a full day's worth of work. Well, as you might imagine, Kevin was having difficulty balancing the demands of running basically a computer science department and curriculum in public schools and his job at Microsoft. And so there was beginning to be concern about his performance at Microsoft. And his supervisor called our unit, the Citizenship and Public Affairs unit, and said, we have this young man who's doing a phenomenal job with the schools, teaching computer science, not doing so much keeping up with his work at Microsoft. What do you think we should do? And happily, we had the good sense to hire him into our division. And Kevin now works full-time and will take this program across the country. In fact, we'll be at a meeting next week here in New York City to have the TEALS program as part of an ongoing effort in the local schools. We hope to take the program to 37 states over the next 2 years, because believe it or not, most schools in America do not offer a computer science curriculum, and about 75% of the jobs today and going forward are going to require computer science skills. So we're very proud of this program. We're very proud of our employees who are volunteering to support this, and we think that this is just another way through YouthSpark that we can make a difference. There are many, many components to this program. You see on the slide the website. I really encourage you to make note of it. Go look at the site, sign up to be a YouthSpark ambassador on our YouthSpark hub, and get in touch with us if you have any interest in any of the work that we're doing there. I want to just leave you with the thought that what we're really talking about with YouthSpark is the spark for change and igniting the spark in all of you to be change makers and to make a difference. And I would close with this thought that the wise words from someone else, that the best way to predict the future is to create it. All of you are creators, all of you are innovators, and so get involved, ignite your own spark, and thereby ignite the spark in your community, in your country, and in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. What a wonderful story. So now you know that you don't need to be productive to get a job at Microsoft. You need to be creative. If you come up with new ideas, YouthSpark will spark some new ideas. So why don't we have just a few minutes. So I would like to invite questions from the floor. What I'd like to do is state your name and ask a brief question, and Andrea will give you some interesting feedback. Who would like to start first?
Can't see you. Can
Yeah,
you
come
come
forward.
out from behind there?
Yeah, come to one of these.
Hello everyone. My name is Sandro Takishvili. I'm from Georgia, and I really have a really much interest in this project of the TEALS that Microsoft is offering. But unfortunately, I'm from Georgia, and I'm not able, I think, to get this project because I'm really interested in the Microsoft and in the programming skills. So, what should I do, and how can I contact with Microsoft?
Well, we haven't taken it global, but we've had many, many inquiries about how we might make this a global initiative. And so what we're doing is really piloting in several communities, including New York and Seattle, Boston, Tennessee, and other places. And we hope that once we get through a complete year cycle of delivering and implementing this program in communities in the U.S., that through our global network, we have offices all over the world in 106 countries, that we might be able to roll out a plan for international expansion. We know that our employees are eager and willing to participate, so that's part of the equation. There's also an enormous amount of training that has to be developed, so we're trying to concretize the curriculum in a way that we'll be able to send it out and make it available. So please get in touch. My email, again, because I don't have any cards today, I had a few yesterday, is A-N-Taylor, A-N-T-A-Y-L-O-R, @Microsoft.com, and I'd be happy to take your further inquiries about this particular program or other questions.
Thank you, Andrea. And so, by the way, you should also figure out how you might create these local communities. And the way you ask that question, Microsoft can help you, guide you in terms of how to do this. So, next question, please.
Thank you.
And then
Thank you. My name is Daquan Love from Hampton. Am I talking or something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Are you?
We can't see you properly. Where are you? Come forward. Why don't you come in the front row and speak to him? Oh,
Yes.
there.
Yes, I'm over here.
Okay, good. I can see you now.
Good afternoon. My name is Daquan Marcel Love. I'm a junior political science major, leadership studies minor from Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, in the United States of America. And my question, I did speak with you yesterday, Ms. Taylor. I just wanted to first off commend Microsoft for having such great corporate stewardship. And with regards to the YouthSpark program, you mentioned some of the cities such as Seattle and New York, I believe, but are there opportunities for the ambassadors program that you were referring to happen in smaller cities such as Hampton? And if so, what would that entail and how can we get involved today?
Thank you for that question and for your interest, obviously, in participating. And one of the wonderful things about technology is that we have a very robust online community. So if you go to the website and you sign up to become part of the YouthSpark Hub, we can have a dialogue, interactive dialogue online, make you aware of the things that might be happening, if not in Hampton, in a nearby city or in your region. And there are many ways that we can communicate with you. We hope, again, this is year one of a 3-year program. So as we roll it out, we're finding that the demand has exceeded in many ways our expectations. So if you're part of the network, if you're part of the YouthSpark Hub, then that is the way that we can help you to become more informed. The other thing, and for those of you who are in the US and in other countries, in fact, and you can read about this on the web, we have partnerships with 5 national organizations in the United States: Boys and Girls Club, City Year, Junior Achievement, the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, and Year Up. And in and among that mix of 5 national youth-serving organizations, we're covering all 50 states with some aspect of the YouthSpark program. So that would be another entry point if any of those programs are in your community. Through their network, you can access the YouthSpark activities.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm really sorry, time has run out. I'm respectful for some of the people who've asked questions. Would you have the ability to ask the question in 30 seconds and then Andrea will answer that separately, offline? Would that work for you, young lady? 30 seconds? You okay? Ma'am?
I'll try. I'm really only young in spirit, as you can see by the color of my hair. I am working in, my name is Joan Davis, I'm with the Grey Panthers, and I have been following climate change and global warming, and it seems to me that jobs in the future will be different. The kinds of work we do might be different, and the way we work, the way we farm and the way we manufacture. Is there anything that people are working on to study that subject, or how could I get more familiar with what is being done? Because I think the future will be quite different from what the working life as I had growing up.
I will answer this very briefly now, and I'm happy to speak to you offline. As we heard yesterday, and as we know at Microsoft, we need 600 million new jobs to be created in the next 10 to 15 years. We don't, in order to satisfy the demands that we've talked about earlier with unemployment, we have no idea what those 600 million jobs will be, because the technology and the rate of change is such that those jobs have yet to be created. In fact, that's the challenge for all of you, to create those 600 million jobs. And we will know as those unfold how technology will impact the different ways in which we work. But it's very challenging to try to train a generation and prepare a generation for a universe that does not exist. I would just close by saying that I trained to be a journalist And the company that I worked with, the Boston Globe, is now opening up their space for community activities because they don't have the need for journalists anymore. So I'm very glad that I was able to make the transition to Microsoft, and I encourage all of you to be lifelong learners so that you can make the transition to your future. Thank you very much.
Andrea, thank you. I want to close by saying, talking about lifelong learning, I think you've probably heard of the new terminology called MOOCs. How many of you have heard that? MOOCs. Have a look at it. It stands for Massive Open Online Courses. And that is the trend of the future. There is edX Exchange, there's Udacity, Coursera, you should look at that. That's the way people will learn in the future, not simply just sitting in a university context. So it's something which, and by the way, that'll address some of the issues which you rightly point out, that we need to be ready for the future, all of us, the entire generation. So I want to close by thanking Andrea for coming here, and I'm really grateful for all the interesting ideas and advice you've given the young people, but more importantly for being a very special friend of the United Nations. On behalf of the Friendship Ambassadors Foundation, which I'm now taking over, Patrick, I want to thank you again for giving us this wonderful opportunity to be here. Thank you. Thank you. Another round of applause for Patrick. And I think it would not be unreasonable if I request Jamie to do one of those Obama cheers once again. Yeah, please. Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it.
I'm fired. I'm fired up. Who else is fired up? Fired up? Fired up? That's great. Thank you so much. We're a little bit time. I'm going to, Amir Dossal made a very nice segue to our next panel. He mentioned lifelong learning. And our next panel is on the link between academic development and youth leadership. So I'm going to invite to the stage Joyce Moy, Executive Director of the Asian American Research Institute at the City University of New York, Sienna Dukowski, raised in Brooklyn, I like that, who is COO of the Institute of Global Conscious Change, and Cosmo Fujiyama, who, to say the very least, is a Reynolds Fellow in Social Entrepreneurship at NYU's Wagner School. So welcome. As our guests get settled here, I just want to add one comment to the YouthSpark program. Microsoft has clearly been a fantastic steward for youth leadership and youth ideas and development. But in the case of, for instance, Kevin, the Microsoft employee, that was a young person who saw a problem in their community, a lack of, let's say, science education, and developed an idea, a solution to that problem, and then recruited those around him and used whatever resources he or she had to kind of bring that solution to fruition. So I think that's a great example of youth leadership, and of course, it wouldn't have been possible without Microsoft's support. But I just want to point that out, that the idea and the solution came from a young person who saw a problem and acted. With that, let's transition to our next panel. I thought I'd start most generally by asking each of our panelists in about 5 minutes to just explain how you got to the stage today. What was your path? I spoke to a lot of audience members who kind of said that they were most inspired and learned the most from hearing how people got to the positions they're in today. So if you could explain just a little bit about how you ended up where you are today and what your organization does that you're most closely affiliated with. If we could start with you, Joyce, if you wouldn't mind.
No, not at all. It's really wonderful to be here, and I have to tell you that I engage in activities like this because I get a tremendous amount of inspiration from young people. When you are working hard day to day and you're dealing with all sorts of things, including administrative work and so forth, you sometimes lose sight of what it is that brought you to the kinds of work that you do. I started off going to law school as a young person, wanting to save the world. While I was there, I found that I was very, very good at certain subjects. Tax, something really exciting, tax law. And I pursued it. The reason for it is because I began to understand that if I were going to make a change in the world, I had to be able to sustain myself. It was not going to be a fruitful endeavor for me to struggle, to try to take care of a family and to help members of my family at the same time that I was trying to change the world. And so what I decided to do was to pursue a career that would ultimately allow me to bring resources and networks back to the causes I cared about. And that's actually how I pursued it. Anytime I worked for a not-for-profit at which I was able to influence what happened in terms of the operation of that organization, I made sure that the first people I sustained were the people who did the hard work that all of you in this room are thinking about in terms of helping the communities whose issues we want to address. But the first thing was to sustain myself and my staff. And with that, my people were able to give me the best of their abilities.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Sienna, would you like to follow up?
I had no intention of getting involved in international development. I wanted to own restaurants and hotels, and so I attended Cornell University School of Hotel Administration and learned how to cook and learned how to manage, and decided then that I wanted to do something different with my education. And so I actually moved to South Sudan for 3.5 years, where I managed residential compounds where aid workers were living and working. And that's how I became involved in international development. I started volunteering at the local orphanage and fell in love. I fell in love with my children and wanted to do everything to really improve their lives. And so I decided that owning restaurants was cool, but not meant for me. And I actually returned to America after 3.5 years in order to pursue an education that would actually support my new career goals. And I also wanted to gain experience in international development. And when I got back to America, I really didn't know how I was going to do that with a hospitality background. And I was given the opportunity through the Institute for Conscious Global Change to use my management skills that I had developed in South Sudan and take on a management role within international development. And so that's how I've been able to transfer my skills and learn about MDGs. I had no idea what an MDG was when I joined the organization, but I've been able to enhance that part of my knowledge, and so that I can better prepare myself for my career in the future, which will definitely be more engrossed in international development.
I really love that no matter what your skill set is, there's some way you can harness it for the purpose of international development. That's fantastic, Sienna. And Cosmo.
Hi, good evening, everybody, or afternoon, I should say. I first want to thank you, James, Judith, and Patrick, for inviting me to be on this panel. As James mentioned, I am a current fellow, a Reynolds Fellow in Social Entrepreneurship at New York University. I'm a second-year graduate student at the New York University Wagner School of Public Service, where I'm studying the intersection of policy, technology, and social innovation. To step back a little bit, I'll speak about kind of what I know now later, but I want to tell a little bit about my story of how I got here, James, and my background, because I think it's very relevant, and I only started thinking about it after the fact. I'm the daughter of a ski entrepreneur. So my dad left Japan to build a ski business in California because he was a professional skier and loved the slopes in California. My mother is an educator, and I really believe I'm the daughter of both. My passions are about helping and identifying ways to encourage people with dreams to develop businesses that help bring social value, and also I feel that the importance of training the next generation of social entrepreneurs and innovators is really important as well. And there's a lot of learnings that we have about how do you do that. So I went to school and I loved stories as well. So I studied American literature at the College of William & Mary in Virginia, which is near Hampton. I know somebody said that earlier over there. And I started to travel to gather more stories outside of the US, also in Virginia and California where I was born. And I ended up in Honduras actually on a service learning trip when I was a freshman. And by listening to the stories, I only captured maybe hola, ¿cómo estás? And that was it. So I committed to going back that summer to learn Spanish. That journey kept going. I kept going back to Honduras every break I had in undergrad until my brother and I started to go together and we developed a social enterprise, a nonprofit organization aimed at educating and empowering young people that we met in Honduras, but also in our universities across the United States. So the initiative that my brother and I started in 2006 was what to me was what my parents were doing, educating others and also following your passion. My brother still lives in Honduras and he runs the nonprofit on the ground. Our first Honduran volunteers are now the COOs and the CTOs of the company. So we're really thinking about how do we train the local talent, which is really exciting. And I also was humbled and I knew that I needed to learn a lot more, so I came back to graduate school. And I think that my journey began as a social entrepreneur, and I also proudly think social entrepreneurship is really important as well. What does that mean? Working within organizations to be innovative. We don't have to all create new ones. There's amazing ones out there in the corporate sector, also in the nonprofit sector. And how can we be developing new approaches from within? So I've worked for other organizations like Ashoka, which funds and supports social entrepreneurs around the world, and also for Dell Social Innovation Challenge, which funds young entrepreneurs, young innovators and their ideas as well. And I think I've learned a great deal from working within nonprofits that I deeply admire and look forward to thinking about what is the next step and how do we train the next generation. We're amongst the colleagues, I guarantee that you'll be sitting next to somebody that will be making a big difference. And that journey is a long one. However, lifelong learning being the theme of this panel, I think is very appropriate because it doesn't matter where your journey began. It's really about where you are, what is the vision you want to get to, and also how are you paying homage to the past? What did you learn, and how are you applying that to your life as a professional and also as an individual and making change in the world? So I wanted to share that background because I know our time is limited today, and if I can be of help to this group, this incredible group you guys have assembled, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you, Cosmo. That's fantastic. I love that you really have gotten into the concept of being a social entrepreneur, which is kind of what I meant when I spoke about that Kevin story, that really finding your passion and utilizing whatever resources and background and skills that you have to really impact that. And then moving to a more collective action. I know, Joyce, you and I were talking about kind of the role of student activists in general. And, you know, as someone who's been in the academic field and you've had students yourself, you know, how have you seen student activism develop over the years and really come to define our planet?
Well, I really love being on this panel with these two very articulate young women. In an earlier panel, they talked about intergenerational interactions and so forth. I have to say that I started my educational career at a time when the internet did not exist, and I dare say most of you in this room were not born. But I've watched students over the years, and the interactions have not changed a lot in terms of being in a common environment where you share ideas, where you talk together, where the passions rise. And you begin to see that when these students are together, their idealism, their concepts of wanting the best in the world, for the world to be better, really comes to the fore. And so if you look throughout history, as was mentioned much earlier today, you will see that young people and students have been at the forefront of some of the biggest revolutions in the world. And today, these same kinds of community, the same kinds of work together continue through the use of technology. And I have to say, too, that the changes in terms of what's happening in the educational world is that life learning how to learn is going to be what's going to sustain you and help you adapt to all of the changes. The other thing is that the world no longer belongs to somebody that has a simple set of skills, and you may not call physics a simple set of skills, but it's a discipline, for example. It's the ability to link what's going on in the world around you that's going to make you a person that's going to have an impact in the world. For example, a guy like Zuckerberg was not an in-depth computer scientist, nor did he have really strong programming skills. However, he observed how people interacted socially, and he applied what skills he had and brought about, in a way, a revolution. Innovation happens in three basic ways. You come up with something completely new, you improve something, or you wind up applying something that already exists in a completely different way or in a new context. So keep all of that in mind, and I think the key to everything is networking and continuing to have conversations with one another.
Thank you. That's another great segue to Sienna and her organization. Sienna, can you explain maybe about how your institution, your hospitality skills combined with software engineers and harnessing the power of youth have created tools to help achieve the MDGs and development goals?
Certainly. Piggybacking off of what Joyce said, we recognize as an organization that the youth really are really pushed to enact change in their communities. And so we have chosen to focus all of our work on the youth, both in the leadership of our organization and the target market for the product that we are developing. We are using geographic information systems to develop maps of what least developed countries can look like as a developed country. And we're engaging the youth in conversations as to how we get from point A to point B. We're also engaging youth in the conversation as to what you want your country to look like. If you're, for me, if you're a Southern Sudanese person who is coming back to your country for the first time now that it's in independence, where do you want to see it in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? We use technology that the youth is more familiar and more comfortable with in order to develop these maps and really engage them on bringing these countries, seeing these plans come to fruition.
Cosmo, do you have a response to either of those, or do you want to maybe tie that into what your experience with Ashoka was? Because I know Ashoka also works on social innovation and sponsors youth leadership in that field.
James, when we spoke on the phone, I think we hit on a really interesting chord about, there's tension. If I'm going to be a social entrepreneur, do I have to leave school or leave my day job? Or it seemed like a trade-off, that it was this decision to kind of take this road that was going to be away from something else. And I think that what we spoke about on the phone, and also I'd be interested in what the other panelists have to say about this in connection to some of the development of the skills that you're working on, and also what you're doing with how to inspire and activate activism in youth, whether through internet or otherwise. I think when it comes to development work and also social innovation, the dean of the business school at NYU, I had a meeting with him the other day, and he said something really insightful about leadership. And he said, I look at my job as dean of the business school as listener-in-chief. And I thought that was so concise to what this work has meant to me. I know that as a student and also in school, it's hard to be on the ground all the time. However, listening can happen in many ways. And I think that we just have to be in this new modern age, leveraging technology and how we can interact and communicate with each other, but really have an eye towards what it means to be actively engaged, and whether that's through technology, in the classroom, or on the ground, working on the ground with your constituents and your partners. I think have that in the back of your mind. Even if for me, like I mentioned, listening in Spanish for me was really difficult at first. But empathy, actually, you can hear empathy throughout different words and language. It's communicated actually in your cheeks. As a baby, neuroscientists have studied how babies understand happiness through the formation of the muscles in your cheek and the way you smile. And I think that understanding what is human connection, how do you build that, is going to be the science that computer scientists are thinking about, because the internet and technology is going to really move this forward. But as you become CEOs and CTOs and COOs and just general social innovators and innovative thinkers, think about that as a backbone. I definitely think that the classroom is a space for that as well. And why the Reynolds program at NYU is really, for me, an opportunity as a graduate student to both be in the classroom, but also to get out of the classroom and to start to apply what I learned in the classroom right away. And Ashoka, just to kind of rope that in, is a nonprofit organization. It's based out of DC, but I've been working with them in New York. And 50% of the fellows that have been funded by Ashoka now have done something called systems change, in which they've really tipped the infrastructure. They've made policy change possible. They started as a social entrepreneur working within the different constituencies, but then they changed the systems. And when they step back and they say, what was really important was building empathy, was building understanding with the people that they were, again, engaged with, and really understanding the needs from that level in order to make that possible. And that might mean building empathy amongst policymakers. It might mean building empathy amongst the business owner and the bank. It's really about understanding where power and those dynamics lie, and then how you as a bridge can be that bridge. And I think that we must focus on that, being thinking about the next generation of skills, 21st century skills, being a team leader and a teammate, empathy, and having those analytical skills to say, okay, let me think back. Let me step back, not just do right away, and just think. I'm grateful for graduate school to be able to offer me that, but at the same time, I can feel it in my own feet, kind of the desire to propel into the ground. And I think being able to do both is the benefit and the paradox of our generation.
Thank you, Cosmo. That's beautiful. You mentioned that Reynolds was a great opportunity for you, and Ashoka seems to be an opportunity. I was hoping that maybe the panelists could share opportunities with the audience, kind of suggestions for ways forward. I know, Sienna, you had mentioned some ideas in particular. I thought we could go to that and then open up to some Q&A. Would any of you like to begin? Sienna?
I just want everybody to remember that no matter what your career field, there is a way that you can make an impact. And so for me, as a hospitality major who really had no interest in international development, I had to figure out how to use my skill set in order to have an impact. And I know the Institute for Conscious Global Change has really provided me and a number of the other leadership within that organization the opportunity to utilize our skills, whether it be architects, engineers, people in the medical field, people in agriculture. We've all been able to come together and really figure out how we can work together in order to build a better world. And so, being that I do have limited experience in international development, I would say that ICGC is something that all of you guys can look into and see define what your role in international development can be and how that aligns with your passion, and really make it work. Figure out how you can have an impact while not, giving up on any of your interests.
Thanks. I would give you maybe two pieces of advice, which I've borrowed from other very well-known people. I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh a couple of years ago, and I took my older daughter with me. She is in the policy field. And the question she asked Dr. Yunus was, if you had only one piece of advice to give a young person, what would it be? And he said, choose a cause, no matter how small it is, and begin to take steps to reach the vision for that particular issue. Just any step. Another thing I like to quote is by Peter Drucker, and Peter Drucker is known by anybody who's gone to business school. And essentially what he says is that if you are good at something, it is easier to become excellent at it than it is to be mediocre or poor at something and then to become competent. So whenever you hear this expression, follow your passion, it's not just a saying. There is some truth to it. Follow your passion and look at how the things that you do well can be applied to the things that you care about.
Thank you again. I just want to jump in here. I'm taking notes from the panelists myself because this helps, right, with all your notes. And you have all this running notes. I usually do like a voice memo and I listen to it, Otherwise, I'll forget. But opportunities, goodness. I mean, can we think about all of the platforms out there that bleed all of these incredible opportunities? I'd like to encourage you to think about the opportunity costs, right? So when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So when you are excited by something, really think about your not to-do list. As a social innovator or as a aspiring innovator, you already have it. You have the passion and the grit to be in this room. I know that about each and every one of you and us. However, some of us suffer, myself included, from the yes, 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 yes syndrome. And it actually takes away from my productivity in the other things. And nobody really mentioned this to me when I was a young person. So I do want to mention that because I think we are faced with so much. Thinking about your not-to-do list sharpens what Joyce was talking about, what you really want to do. And it forces you to focus on that. So to give an example of my not-to-do list, it's about personal care, but I think about not giving up on my sleep, right? Taking on too much that I'm not sleeping doesn't lead to productive outcomes. So even the little things about what it means to be an effective leader means setting up those boundaries based on what makes you, optimize your own skills. So think about that. I just wanted to throw that out there before. Now I have a listing of opportunities that might interest you. I mentioned Dell Social Innovation Challenge. That is an annual competition. More than 3,000 applicants this year, pitching their ideas from over 70 countries, up to $350,000 in prize money for innovative ideas. That's an opportunity for anybody in school that wants to apply from any country. I also think that it's important that you get out there and start to blog if you're not already doing so. Not necessarily to get your opinion out there, but to ask for feedback, to do that listening skill that I mentioned. And how and why does it help? It ultimately helps you crowdsource data in a way that you might be able to synthesize and think about new connections you never thought about. I say that and add that I personally do not blog, but will begin blogging through a course I'm taking at NYU. And what my professor is doing is something very interesting. It's called flipping the classroom. So she's saying, I'm one person. There's 60 of you in the crowd. Why am I the only one imparting all the knowledge on the 60 of you? The 60 brains together must come up with something more interesting than I have to say. So what we're doing as a class is each of us are blogging or cross-blogging and kind of setting up group blogs so that the dialogue can happen outside the classroom as well. So as you work and volunteer and intern and or speak to somebody that you really admire in this space, write about it, whether it's in a personal journey, voice memo it, think about it later, and or put it out there in the world so others can hear about your thoughts. They don't have to be polished. Questions are really good. I'm still struggling with, and that is a really great way also if you want to have a 30-minute chat with somebody you really respect in the field. My dream was to talk to Bill Drayton, who is the founder of Ashoka. His book, How to Change the World, written by David Bornstein, inspired me to take my idea to company in 2006. In 2009, I was in his office speaking with him about how he started Ashoka and started to work with him as an intern and then as a staff member. So I think about all those opportunities. A lot of them have to do with about humbling ourselves that we are still learning, and I think all of us can agree that that's the case. But the ones that I think will make the biggest disruption, positive disruptions, are the ones that are unafraid to ask the tough questions to yourself and also to the world, the people around you, and to engage them. Because we know that these problems can't be solved by ourselves. That's why Ashoka has a network of 3,000 fellows. That's why NYU Reynolds intentionally selects fellows not only from the policy school, but from the sciences, the law school, the business school, Poly, which is the engineering school. And so I have 10 other colleagues, all from different schools, and we meet weekly. How would you think about this from an angle with your legal background? And we think about it this way, so it's interdisciplinary by nature. Immerse yourself with people that are passionate like you, but also immerse yourself with people that are not afraid to ask you, well, what do you really mean by that? And I think that'll help you along the way.
All great advice. Yeah. From all of our panelists, fantastic advice and life stories. I'm inspired to keep doing this for many more years. But are there questions from the audience? Let's open this up. I'm glad we have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions. I know I have a bunch of questions, but I'd rather hear from you. Anyone, please? How about from this side of the room? I feel like everyone's kind of hiding back on this side. I know you can hear us. Any questions? Any thoughts? My friend from Toronto, maybe? Please. Hold on one second.
Hi, my name is Sienna. I'm a French international student in the United States. I study poli-sci in the Middle East, and we heard today about a lot of people who had great ideas and managed to build something out of them, and I just wanted to know more about the process from taking an idea and then build an organization. Like, how did you go about it?
I'll tell you what I didn't do that I would do now that I know what I know. And this is important because I think, you know, this is a part of the learning process. We can learn laterally from each other. And so political science, Middle East, if we want to follow up, we can after this. Now that I know what I know from the mistakes I made along the way, figure out and articulate, and it's going to take many, many iterations, what is the end outcome? What does the world look like because of your effort? Be able to have a quantifiable way of identifying that and also a qualitative way. The stories, the reasons why. And if you reverse engineer it that way, you know how you're going to be accountable to your donor that gave you that $1 or $1 million to say, this is the end outcome, are you with me or not? And when you get there or don't get there, at least you knew what you were going to. Because the worst case scenario is to say, here's what I want to do now. You're going to shift and change because the world is changing, the needs are changing. But if you don't have a clear idea where the boat is going, no one's going to get on board, right? So don't paint the vision just to have a nice vision. Paint it because you really want that in the Middle East or in whatever context you're thinking. So that's the first piece of advice. Identify where you want to go and the outcome. Because the strategies along the way will change. And that's okay. That's about being an entrepreneur. Figuring out the best route there that's the most effective, that leads to the outcome that you're seeking. So that's one. And then there's so many other tactics and great books that I can connect you to think about how do you build a company, how do you apply for the 501c3 equivalent in the different countries, which is the nonprofit status. Do I go business or, you know, there's lots of different structural questions you want to ask along the way. So build your board of advisors. That is going to be a good sounding board. They don't have to be the board of advisors that are legally in your document, but think about your board that is going to be maybe the 3 or 4 years advanced in the same field that you're working in. They're going to help you give advice that's more attuned and expert-oriented to the specific interest area. And being able to bounce off those ideas is going to accelerate your ability to kind of get to the vision quicker. But also because it's lonely. This stuff is hard. You know, and you don't want to be in a vacuum. You really want to be vetting your idea out. So those are 2 pieces of advice I would give generally to anybody thinking about taking their idea to the next level. There are tactical things you want to think about in terms of finance, legal structure, your team build up, all of those things. But there's tons of books you can find. And I strongly recommend that you immerse yourself in that and find those mentors that will help you along the way.
Yeah, I second what Cosmo said. But I also want you to think in terms of making sure that you're not afraid to ask for help and for support. You're really not going to know everything and you're not going to be able to do everything. I love the idea that Sienna talked about in terms of helping people visualize what they might want their country to look like. Because that really makes concrete what it is that you're trying to do. So anytime you can connect what it is you want to do to something concrete, using stories and so on, that's going to help you to further your cause. And the other thing is that if you're the thought leader, if you are the visionary, you must free yourself from the day-to-day tasks. You've got to pick your head up so that you're the one that can push your mission forward. Because, you know, I've worked with over 2,000 entrepreneurs over the years, and I've got to tell you that entrepreneurs are their worst enemies. That includes those who are entrepreneurial in the social causes that they care about. They get so hung up and stuck on making sure that the lights are on and so forth, or somebody gets into the office to open the doors, that they don't focus on grabbing the guy that just walked in the room that could make a big difference in whether or not your organization gets funding or not. You know, put the chair down and walk over and talk to the guys that you're supposed to talk to. Talk to the top. Don't get bogged down in the little stuff. You have to trust the people around you.
Let's move on to our next question. This is my friend from Toronto, whose name I really need to remember. Want to remind me of her name and ask a question?
Hi, my name is Leah. I'm just from Obolak, Northern Canada. I had a question. I'm originally from Vancouver, and I came to Toronto pretty recently. And I'm just going to explain the youth scene in Vancouver. So there's the city focuses a lot on youth outreach and tries to reach out to a lot of youth. So we have a lot of development going on, a lot of different organizations, almost to the point where it's excessive, and a lot of our youth are overwhelmed when we hear about the opportunities available to us. So what I'm kind of wondering is, when there's a setting where there's so much youth involvement going on, how do you make your organization look unique and differentiate between every other organization out there?
Well, I mean, I don't know what the reason is for this explosion of focus on youth. Perhaps it's availability of funding. Perhaps it's a need to engage the youth because of social problems. If you don't engage the youth will apply their energy wherever they can. And that could be the reason. But I think to differentiate yourself, the leadership does have to articulate the mission. And I think that the key is that there be some transference of skills. If young people learn skills that can then be applied to the work world, or can then be applied in terms of their analytical abilities and critical thinking to their pursuit of academic careers and so forth, that would differentiate you. In other words, it's not just we get together and play basketball. It's also, what is it about this interaction? Opportunities to talk to people from different walks of life, being exposed to people from other parts of the city that you normally don't engage, meeting people who are in a generation that is above you or below you. These are the things that are going to make the difference. And then having somebody facilitate or guide the process so that, although some of this stuff happens by osmosis, sometimes I find that you simply need to articulate it. At the end of the day, when I do sessions, I generally say, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you what I said I was going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you what I told you. And because of that process, people retain and actually can distill things so that they understand the value that they walk away from that experience with.
I definitely second the idea of being able to articulate what your project is and being able to, you need to know what sets your project apart, first of all, and be able to articulate that. And so, as you were saying, as Joyce mentioned, you're not just getting together and playing basketball. As great as, the physical activity is, it's bigger than that. And why and how, and really engage people in that conversation.
Oh, just a quick thought to that. I think that's a really great challenge to have. And if you could be the bridge between the organizations so that you can think about an effective collaborative problem-solving platform, I think you have a home run. Why? Because this is the same challenge so many corporations are having amongst their entire company. It's the challenge that we have in nations and also international relations, right? How do we collaborate? What is the science of that? Because there's going to be value in that relationship. And I'll give you an example with NYU Reynolds. I mentioned earlier that we have fellows from every school at NYU. That is not an easy text because sometimes I don't know what the language might be in an engineering context. However, I was leading an initiative with Ashoka called the Ashoka Youth Venture High School Dream It, Do It Challenge. And we brought in 100 students from all across New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut to work on a venture, but training them throughout the whole year on skills and innovation at the business school at NYU. And I was at a point where I was like, oh my goodness, all these students are so amazing and they're so excited, but they're hungry for this skill set, that question, and I didn't have the answers, of course, just as one person. But NYU Reynolds provided me 100 other alums and current students as kind of the, what would you call it, this council, this diverse council of talent that we could tap into and broker these relationships, say, you should talk to this person does this work in that place, and really helping match talent with need. And I think that, Catch a Fire does that really well. It's a nonprofit organization that connects people with their skill and their abilities and their interests. There's other ones like Skillshare where you share your skill with others. But I think that is going to be a necessary skill set moving forward in terms of leadership. And if you can figure out, kind of zoom out, see the panoramic perspective of what's happening in Toronto, and think about where you and your colleagues can play a role in collaboration. And I think putting aside ego and putting aside that is really important to achieve that. I have no doubt that any one of you guys, doesn't have that genuine spirit, but I think thinking about that as well. That's exactly what we need in this changing globe. So I think that's a good challenge to have. But thank you for raising it.
And if I may, following up on that, just because somebody else is doing something doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it too. There's enough room in this world for a number of organizations to try to tackle a particular problem. And then if you're able to collaborate, the scalability of that becomes so much larger. In addition to that, get to know the folks around you and see what channels they have. Perhaps you can piggyback on their channel. So let me just give you something that might resonate with you in a more concrete way. If somebody's got a sales channel and they're able to transport things all over the country whose problems you want to try to address, perhaps you can piggyback on that entire transportation distribution system to distribute medicine or something that you need to get out there in order to help the community that you're targeting. So don't think that you have to be absolutely the original person that came up with the idea. There's lots of places and lots of ways to tackle the same problem.
I think those are all great answers. I don't know where all the basketball references come from, but that's my favorite activity is actually to go play intercity basketball, and that's how I meet other communities locally. And I do just also want to say, before we answer our questions from Hampton, is that that's actually one of the ways the IYC was founded here in 2007, and Patrick even suggested that there be a global youth organization that acted as the glue between the cracks of global youth activism, and that's what we've kind of tried to do in keeping track of all the youth conferences, keeping track of all the youth policy developments, trying to create a central clearinghouse. And now with the appointment of a special envoy for youth from IYC, I think we're trying to do that. But I really think that's an important thing that all of us can do, is trying to link and build capacity instead of just reinventing the wheel. I think that's a really good takeaway. I think we have time for one more question. Sorry to our friends from Hampton. I see Latifah over there.
You tried. Good.
Hi, my name is Latifah. I'm from Bahrain. So I'm also I graduated almost 2 years ago. So I'm a political science major, and I'm from the Middle East. And I just wanted to ask Sienna and Cosmo, you both worked, you kind of built your knowledge and your skills here in the United States, but then you kind of worked abroad, Cosmo in Honduras and Sienna in Sudan. And I just wanted to ask, how did you adapt that knowledge to the culture and the traditions in the country that you worked in? All the ideas here that I kind of got from the conference are great, but I keep thinking, how do I implement them when I go back home? And it's just the difficulty of kind of understanding how things are done here and then how they're done back home and how they can be adapted. And I think it would be useful to know how you guys managed to do that. Thank you.
When I decided to go to South Sudan, I really don't know what I was thinking. I had just graduated from college and I didn't want to work for Hilton or Marriott, so I was really looking for another opportunity outside of America to kind of figure my life out. And so I didn't know how I was going to approach going to another country that I knew very little about. I pretty much packed and went. And when I got there, the first thing that I realized that I had to do was
relax and figure out what the atmosphere is like, figure out what's going on, take in the culture, and not in any way try to impart my American know-how on anybody else, because I wasn't in America anymore. And being able to do that, I was able to, gain a lot of respect with the people that I was working with, and I did a lot of hospitality training while I was there with the local community, and I think that being able to stop and take a step back and not to, be high and mighty enabled me to become one with the community that I was working with, and then, we could transfer information. So I could learn about Mandazi, and I could teach about, donuts, which are basically the same thing. And being able to do things like that really enable you to go into any environment, and really, you have to understand that it's a partnership. You're going someplace new, you're learning about them as much as they want to learn about you. And if you keep that in mind, you'll be fairly successful. That answers your question.
One more quick answer. Yeah, that's a great question. Great question, and I think your adaptability is right. It's not adoptability. It's not adopting a model and boom, putting it somewhere. You have to be thinking on your feet. And I think listening carefully to what's said and also not said. Gosh, I could talk to you forever about this space because I struggle with it. And navigating New York when I moved here was like something more difficult, I felt, even than moving to Honduras. I spent about 4 years there, so I think be prepared to be there if you're really serious about work that's international. We can't do helicopter aid, and we can't understand unless we're there really listening. So I think that was something I learned and I was humbled with. But through my graduate work, I was just in India and I was just in Fiji, and literally a day in between of travel. And I think being able to see different cultures are perhaps the adaptability of kind of geographics and language. In those two countries, English was prevalently spoken, so it was easy to navigate. But at the same time, it's all about how do you capture data? How do you listen and understand information? So there's some great books you can read about that. I think The Startup of You by the founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, writes a really cool book about having a rapid prototype of yourself, meaning that you're kind of always in a beta stage yourself as a young person in particular. As we're in this liminal stage figuring out what we want to do, think about adaptability to your environment, but also to the changes in terms of your passion and what you're thinking about. But go far back in your life history. Think about what you were passionate about when you were 4 or 5 years old, and think about what trends have stuck. Those are some, I think, good indicators of what your home base will be. But again, we can talk offline if that's helpful to you. Thank you for your question.
Great questions, great advice and insight from our panelists, from Joyce, Sienna, and Cosmo. I hope maybe you'll stay around after for some conversation. But thank you all so much for being here. Please, a round of applause. As our guests leave the stage, I'd love to do a quick exercise that's going to involve all of you.